A lot of the people down on BYU's chances in 2025 are missing one critical element that actually favors BYU having a solid season.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. I'm Jake Hatch, executive producer at the KSL Sports Zone in Salt Lake City, Utah, and a 14-year credentialed media member at BYU. I am your resident expert and insiders, your host here on this podcast. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Coming up on today's show, we are going to talk all things BYU football. Number one, we're going to talk about schedule luck and how it actually is working in BYU's favor this fall and why it actually should help them have a relatively solid season if it, on paper, works out in real life. Then we're going to talk about what I took away from day one of BYU fall camp, what I learned, what I observed. We'll get into that, and then we'll finish up today's show with a critical thing that I think that the Locked On Podcast Network as a whole, our Locked On College hosts, missed out. BYU is not represented on the Locked On Top 100 college football players, and I got to say, I think it's a whiff. All right, so without further ado, let's talk about BYU and the 2025 season. Now, a lot of people out there believe that the BYU Cougars are going to struggle this fall simply due to the fact that they're looking at the quarterback situation and thinking, okay, they're going to come back down to earth in their minds. Maybe BYU grinds out a 6-6 or a 7-5 record, because if you look at our friends over at FanDuel, the over-under win total with Jake Retzloff's departure at BYU is now 6.5 wins. Okay. You may quibble with that, but here's the deal. Our good friend Shahan Jayaraja from CBSSports.com wrote an article yesterday about the Big 12 and what he calls schedule luck or strength of schedule in the Big 12. Well, if you go to this article, it breaks down essentially how schedules either hurt or go against or help a team in the Big 12, and he ranks them 1 to 16. If you scroll all the way down to the bottom, it has number 16, the BYU Cougars. Now, you're thinking 16, that's bad. Actually, in this case, 16 is where you want to be. It says this, quote, "The Cougars are working through a quarterback change, but the program will have plenty of time to get back on track. BYU plays 4 of the teams picked bottom 5 in the conference and doesn't play a serious contender until October 18th. Against Utah. Road games against Iowa State and Texas Tech are likely losses, but BYU can be favored in nearly every other game, even without consistency at quarterback." I will just add my amen to that, Shahan Jayaraja. I talked about this, I think it was on Monday, maybe in late last week. I talked about the fact that the first 6 games for BYU, they open up against Portland State 30 days away from today. Then they host Stanford. Those should be wins at home. I think the most likely loss, if you want to call it that, in the first 6 games for BYU is actually week 4 when BYU goes across the country to East Carolina. Now you're thinking, well, Jake, they also have Arizona in there. They've got West Virginia. They've got Colorado. Here's the deal. Colorado's going to be rebuilding. It's a new look Colorado Buffaloes team, and they're early enough in the season that you're not quite sure what to make of Deion Sanders' squad. Maybe they are gangbusters, and you could obviously get hurt by going to Folsom there. But West Virginia has to clear across the country on a short week ahead of General Conference for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and a lot of people believe that Arizona is the absolute dregs of the Big 12 this year. BYU should roll through this first 6 games, in my opinion, at the very worst, 5-1. Now, is that a 5-1 that's a bit of a paper tiger? Sure, because the next 4 games after that, Utah, at Iowa State, at Texas Tech, there's a bye week between there, but then also hosting TCU, that 4-game stretch will truly tell us what I think BYU actually is. Now, if you start 5-1 or 6-0 and then go 0-4, okay, yeah, you were a paper tiger. But then, as Shahan points out here, if BYU goes 2-2 in that stretch, the losses maybe at Iowa State and at Texas Tech, okay, suddenly you're 8-2, 7-3 at the worst, and then you finish it up with some relative patsies. And BYU, yeah, they could be a team that goes 8-4, 9-3, and even 10-2. It's not crazy. It works out. Schedule luck is absolutely a thing. And there are going to be, if BYU does what I am talking about here and pushes it to 9-3 or 10-2 and is once again in the Big 12 mix in terms of a Big 12 title game appearance or the like, there are going to be a ton of people who are naysayers much like they are right now about BYU saying, well, who have they actually played this year? You know what? Blame the schedule makers at the Big 12 conference if that's the case. Now, I also acknowledge that there will always be naysayers and haters who are going to downgrade BYU at any opportunity they possibly can get it. But you can only play the opponents that are put in front of you. It's not BYU's fault that Stanford blew things up with Troy Taylor, who, by the way, just sued ESPN for essentially getting him fired at Stanford. It's not BYU's fault that the schedule makers, put Colorado, West Virginia, and Arizona in BYU's first 3 Big 12 games. It is what it is. This is how the schedule plays out. And every single year, there are teams who are going to get absolutely murdered or crushed by their schedule. There's other teams that are going to get the benefit of the luck schedule-wise. And BYU, on paper right now, absolutely has that luck going for them. It should yield a BYU team that, yes, will have people saying, well, look at strength of schedule for BYU. All you can do is go out there and win the games in front of you. The 4-game stretch starting with Utah October 18th and then stretching over the next month till you finish up against TCU in mid-November. That 4-game stretch is truthfully the stretch of what I think will tell us what this BYU team actually is. They grind out a 3-1 or heck, a 4-0 record in that stretch. Okay, this is a team, speaking of BYU, that's not to be trifled with because they're absolutely legitimate. Now, if they go 1-3 or 0-4, okay, the paper tiger argument absolutely is legitimized. But the good news is BYU has schedule luck on their side this time. And as Shahan points out, and I agree, even with some uncertainty at the quarterback position, that helps BYU's odds of having a pretty solid season, even if they maybe don't have the answer at quarterback. All right, coming up next, we're going to talk about what I took away from day 1 of BYU fall camp. And I'll just say this. Trying to make definitive statements off of a 15-minute observation period, it's foolhardy. I'll explain more next right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends, a new friend over at Drip Drop. Whether you're trying to stay on your routine or whether it's workouts, long days on campus, or staying focused in back-to-back classes, hydration is where it all starts, and that's where our new friends at Drip Drop come into the mix. When you're on top of your hydration, you feel better. Energy, mood, focus, even your skin. It all relates back to being properly hydrated. But getting enough fluids isn't always easy. That's why I want you guys to check out Drip Drop. And I've got to say, it's been pretty fun to have them send me a sample pack to give it a shot. It's doctor developed, scientifically proven for fast hydration, uses the perfect balance of sodium, electrolytes, and glucose to help your body absorb fluids quickly, delivering 3 times the electrolytes and half of the sugar of a leading sports drink out there. That's the best part about this. So take advantage of it, my friends, and get properly hydrated. I can tell you, when I am properly hydrated, I function at a much higher level than when I am not hydrated. Right now, Drip Drop is offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first order. Just head to dripdrop.com and use the promo code Locked On College. That's dripdrop.com, promo code Locked On College for $20 off. Stock up now before the heat hits hard. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. As always, please subscribe, rate, and review. Be a part of the Locked On Cougars family. And get ready. Football season is on its way, everybody. We are in what I call the 5-month marathon that is run at a sprinter's pace for me as a media member. It is a crazy time. My wife is the most understanding person in the world, but the nice part is I am capable of doing everything that I do with you guys because of that. I love what I do. I'm appreciative of all the support we have had. Now it's really time to have fun. It was great to be back out at the Zions Bank practice field. That's what they've titled those now, down there outside the student athlete building in Provo, Utah, for BYU's first practice of the season. Now, as media corps, we got to watch about 15 minutes of practice. And I have seen, let's be honest, some pretty definitive declarations, it feels like, from certain media members off of that 15-minute observation period. And I will reiterate something that Kalani Sitake said yesterday. What we observed yesterday in practice for BYU is not real football. When you're only wearing helmets, it is not real football. Football has guys in pads wearing gladiator armor, essentially, and getting after it. Until the full pads come on for BYU, I withhold a lot of judgments. There are things I see, and I'll talk about what I observed yesterday momentarily, but take it all with a grain of salt right now. Until next week, when BYU dons shoulder pads and puts the actual football pants on and really gets after it, anything to talk about with offensive line, defensive ends, linebackers who are shining, all that stuff, it's not real football. Now, some of you want to turn off the podcast right now and say, Jake, what are you talking about? But it is what it is. What I observed yesterday is BYU has a true three-way battle at quarterback. McKay Hillstead, Trayson Bourget, and Bear Bachmeier are absolutely going to duke this thing out. Now, could BYU have one of those guys in mind, and could the first hour plus of the practice feature a guy who got more reps than the others? Sure. But everything that Kalani Sitake said and everything that these three quarterbacks who spoke to us yesterday, if you missed that podcast, I put 2 podcasts out with those media sessions. You can go back and watch it right now. Everything I heard is that all three of these guys are not budging or yielding an inch to their opponents, but at the same time, fostering a nice camaraderie among each other as they compete for the starting quarterback position. Bear Bachmeier's got every chance to win this job, and I never thought he didn't have a chance to win the job. I just felt like the learning curve might be a bit too steep for him to really earn the trust of his teammates. But if he does that, and Kalani Sitake, Aaron Roderick have said in the past that usually the team will tell you who the starting quarterback is because they'll start to gravitate or essentially, in no uncertain terms, point at the guy who they believe is going to give the team the best chance to win. And if it's Bear Bachmeier, they will not hesitate in starting this young man. And I've got to say, for an 18-year-old true freshman coming in from Stanford, very polished with the media. Now, that's one facet to it, but showed a live arm. He's all of 6'2", all of 220 plus pounds. I stood right next to him, and he's got every opportunity in this mix. And I can't discount with Trayson Bourget. He was saying, hey, I want to prove that I can run the football. I can sling the rock. And McKay Hillstead, I asked him the question, how do you combat being 5'10", essentially? He said, you know what? I can't wish to be taller right now. I just can't wave a magic wand and make it happen. But I have fought with it my entire life. I have succeeded with it my entire life in terms of his diminutive stature. And I will say this, anybody who's saying that he's 5'8", it's not true. Many of you who know me in real life know that I'm talking like I am 6 foot flat on a good day, maybe 5'11" and 7/8 if I shrunk overnight. I am right there. If McKay Hillstead is not 5'10", he's 5'9" and 3/4. You know what? Yes, he is a small quarterback in terms of his height, but he is still capable of being the guy for BYU. And I love the fact that these three are fully intent on duking this out until the coaches essentially put an end to the QB battle. And some of you, I also asked the question to Kalani Sitake yesterday about, hey, when do you want to have a timeline? I said, we could carry it up to game time, but excuse me, he wants it to be decided before then. Do I believe that they'll make that announcement during fall camp? I have a hard time believing it. I said it on yesterday's podcast. For those of you who are everydayers, I said, I think they'll carry it right up to kickoff against Portland State. They very well may, but at the same time, considering it's Portland State as your opener, you could announce it week 3 and not be hurt by it. It's not like you're facing an Alabama in game 1 and you want to hide it from the Crimson Tide or somebody of that ilk in terms of the opponent. Other things I observed yesterday, I like how these wide receivers look physically. Cody Hagan looks bigger and noticeably more confident in terms of playing. Come off of a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It does take time, especially for skill position players. We saw him get reps with the first team offense. That's great to see. JoJo Phillips, that dude is looking rocked out right now. He came to BYU like $180. He's listed at 205 pounds, and he looks every bit of that. And at 6'5", he is he's the prototype at wide receiver for BYU. Chase Roberts looks absolutely ready to rock and roll. So I'm not all that concerned about the wide receivers. Now, obviously, they're going to prove it in real game time action in a month's time, but I do think that the work in the offseason is noticeable. Guys like LJ Martin, he looks rocked out. Last year, he packed on, I think it was 20 pounds between his freshman and sophomore campaigns. He's probably kept that 225 pounds on him. He looks noticeably more chiseled this year, kind of, I guess, transformed his body. And he looked lithe. He looked just really, really smooth. He's got to stay healthy, much like many of these guys do. No Hinckley or Potty yesterday. He was not on the roster BYU distributed, but there are rumors or reports out there. He's still seeking a waiver to play this year. He told Center Street Media on a podcast he is planning on coming back to BYU, and we'll see what happens. I'm very interested to see if he gets that waiver and if and when he gets enrolled at BYU. But in the meantime, guys like Jovesa Demuni are getting those reps that he and Pokai Haunga, et cetera, would have gotten because Pokai was not there at practice either. Let's see. Defensively, Keanu Tanavasa is a force. I just talked about the fact that it's not real football, but let's just put it this way. Keanu Tanavasa, even without pads, is unblockable. You put armor on this dude, It's going to be a scary proposition for anybody. I'm telling you, lining up across from him. He is absolutely dominant. And if you want just one game's evidence of how dominant Keanu Tanavasa and how one single player on a defensive line can essentially wreck a game plan, all you got to do is go back. I know BYU won this game, and watch BYU versus Utah and look for number 57 at defensive tackle. He was a man amongst boys last year against BYU. He is absolutely incredible, and I can't wait to see what he does to some opposing Big 12 offensive lines this season, because he looks like he's in much better shape. He looks more comfortable, and the whole goal for BYU is to keep him as healthy as possible. I wouldn't expect to see a ton of him in terms of live reps in fall camp because there's no need. He is absolutely dominant when he's out there on the field, and I love what I'm seeing from that guy, and I think he is poised to have a monster year. And it could be his only year. He told us on this podcast. I played it on Tuesday. It might have been 2 days ago. Nonetheless, he said that this might be his only year in a Cougar uniform. And what that's going to take for him to be able to jump to the NFL is 12, 13 plus games of tape and showing that he can stay healthy and consistently dominate. So far, so good in that regard. And then one other note, the biggest mistake of the day from the media observation window was a bad decision by Trayson Bourget to throw a pass that Raider Demooney picked off. And it looked like Raider, had he not housed it for a pick six, would have been close to it. Raider Demooney looked really, really good in terms of his read on that play. That's film study, knowing, okay, hey, I got this look. Oh, they're going right here. I'm going to jump this route. And he did it. So bad decision by Trayson Bourget, kind of the black mark on the quarterbacks of the day. I guess the one black mark, if you're chalking it up that way. But Raider Demooney, really, really good job by him noticing it and obviously jumping that route. I'm telling you, I said it on the short I did shortly after practice wrapped up yesterday. Tanner Wall and Raider Demooney, it could be a pretty nice tandem at safety this year for BYU. And I love what Tommy Prasis, Falatau Satuwala, Talon Alfrey, they all bring different things. But I'm telling you, unseating the tandem of Wall and Demooney might be really, really tough for anybody to do unless something crazy happens. So there you go. Some of my observations. But once again, take it all with a grain of salt because, yet again, it is not real football until we get actual pads on. All right, we will finish up today's show on the football front once again. Coming up next, we at the Locked On Podcast Network did a countdown, or I guess a ranking of the top 100 players in college football. And I just got to say this, how in the heck did BYU get left out in the cold? We'll talk about it next right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Now, if you want the latest and greatest news when it comes to the insider notes that you crave about BYU football coming to you minutes after practices end, hey, join the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. It's a great way to interact with the show, support the show, but more importantly than that, get the insider intel that you crave and the updates coming to you right to your phone. You're not having to log into a website or go to a message board to get what you're looking for. Best part is 14 days of a free trial and just $5 a month to be a part of the Insiders Group forever. So join us today. Link is in the show notes below, or reach out to us via social media or email, and we'll get you squared away. But had a nice uptick in subscribers yesterday, as I kind of expected with the first day of training camp. Back out of camp tomorrow. So you want those updates, sign up for the Locked On Cougars Insider Group right now. Let's talk BYU football out the door here, and more in a national context. Now, I have said that I believe it's an absolute travesty that Jack Kelly and Isaiah Glasgow were not named to either one of them were not named to the preseason All Big 12 defensive team. I think they are the best tandem of linebackers in this entire conference. And there's some pretty good linebackers in the Big 12. But between the two of them, there is a glaring lack of awareness of how good these two are. And it's evidenced by our very own rankings here on the Locked On podcast, where we ranked the top 100 players in college football, and some were just absolutely no-brainers. But here's the thing. As that got down towards the end, like I said, we had, I think it was easily 300 plus options to pick from, because each of us as hosts were able to nominate players from our school. I nominated guys like Isaiah Glasgow. I nominated Jack Kelly. I put Keanu Tanavasa on the list. I put Chase Roberts on that list. If I recall correctly, I also put Will Farron. I think it was Tanner Wall were the 6 guys. We had 6 guys we could nominate. And those were the 6 I put on the list. Not a one of them made the top 100. Now, Did I expect Tanner Wall to make that list? No, but I wanted to give him some love and let people know about these guys. The fact that BYU got spurned in this top 100 ranking, I think it's another thing, and I hope that the BYU players may be watching and or listening to this, or if you know them, send it over to them and say, not a one of you, whether it's Isaiah Glasker or Jack Kelly or Keanu Tanavasa or Chase Roberts, are considered among the top 100 players in college football. Now, it's a pretty elite list. Think about it. We have 100 plus guys on every single roster across college football on 135 teams at the FBS level now. So there are thousands of players out there. To make the top 100 of the country, it's pretty elite. But I got to think BYU's got guys of that caliber. I looked at that list when it came out. They sent it to us last week to kind of get a feel for who was on that list. I was looking at them saying, hey, no BYU guys? Is BYU just being overlooked in all of this? But once again, BYU loves this. Speaking of the players, I mean, okay, they don't love it that they're not getting national attention, but they can use it as motivation, fuel to the fire to go out there once again, punch people in the proverbial mouth and show once again that the BYU Cougars do not mess with them. This BYU team exceeded all expectations a season ago. And with all of the turnover, especially at the quarterback position this offseason with Jake Retzlaff, and by the way, good to see him in a Tulane uniform taking reps, it looked like, with the first team for the Green Wave. I wish him nothing but the best as he moves forward with Tulane. You'll never find a bigger Tulane Green Wave fan right now than myself because I want Jake to succeed there. But the bigger point is so many people are down on this BYU team, and it's crazy to think. This is a team that went 11-2, was ranked 13th in the country last year. And you'd think that some people think this is a team that's going to struggle to put anybody, I'm talking on a Big 12, all Big 12 team. Great. Go for it. I felt like it was a miss from our Locked On host. And trust me, all of us on the Locked On College network had the opportunity to vote. We had a chance. We had a list. Go down and rank your 100 players. And like I said, I got through 40 or 50 pretty easily. But as I got into that 60, 70, 80s range, I put Isaiah Glasker and Jack Kelly on my rankings. Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I'm the homer here that's got the blue goggles on that is thinking that they're much better than they are. But go back and watch that Colorado game and watch a guy like Isaiah Glasker get an insane interception, do the primetime shuffle in front of the guy who, invented the primetime shuffle, speaking of Coach Prime. But watch those guys, Jack Kelly and him, play and tell me that they are not among the nation's elite. I'd have a hard time saying that. I think Keanu Tanavasa, the only thing that's holding him back is the fact that he just hasn't been 100% healthy and has not played a ton. But they're dominant players when they're at the peak of their powers. And I got to believe that at least one of those guys should have been ranked in this top 100. But on the flip side, it's more motivation for the BYU Cougars to internalize. And as I mentioned, go out there and use it to say, y'all think you're slick. Y'all think you're going to overlook us once again. And I will forever remember the week 8 or 7 or 8. I got to go back. When BYU went to UCF last year, remember, this is a nationally ranked, a top 20. My voice is being a little bit shot, and we're already starting off the season on a good note. But the bigger point is BYU's top 20, I think, in the country, nationally ranked, undefeated. They go to, I think at that time, they were like 3-4 or 4-5, speaking of UCF, and they were an underdog against the UCF Knights. And I honestly have never felt a vibe around a team and heard guys chatter and heard guys during interviews more upset about the lack of respect that they got. And this is a BYU team that thrived on that disrespect card last year so much. Kalani Sitake, they don't know, but they about to find out. Should have been like the tagline of the 2024 football season for BYU. And that UCF game in particular was that case in point for me. National odds makers thought you were going to go and lose to a sub 500 team as a nationally ranked undefeated team. That BYU team was like, okay, you know what? Let's go out there and let's kick some night booty. And they did that. And yes, I know that Dylan Risk came in late in that game, made it a little more interesting for UCF, but nonetheless, BYU internalized it, used it, and it powered them to an absolutely magical season a year ago. And it feels like that disrespect card is being thrown right back in their lap this year. And if they can use it to the same effect that they had a season ago, we're all going to sit back and watch this BYU team kick butt, take names, and just move on to the next. I'm all for it. I love the fact that this BYU team, I don't think they're necessarily going to complain about the lack of respect in terms of speaking out in media settings and the like, but amongst their teammates, yeah, they're going to probably be a little bit upset. But then I think some of the leaders on this team, guys like a Tanner Wall, like a Keanu Tanavasa, they'll turn and say, hey, use it. Use it as that fuel that's going to make you say, we're going to go out there and we're going to do what we did a season ago, and we're going to have the nation talking about us. This is a BYU team who was so close to making the college football playoff. When they dominated Colorado the way they did in the Alamo Bowl, there were so many people in the national media who said, you know what? Maybe we missed out on not putting BYU in the college football playoff. Could that be the same circumstance this year if they put together another magical season? It could. But everything looking at this, like the top 100 deal, the fact that FanDuel, our friends, have downgraded BYU's over and win total to 6.5, great. Go for it. This is a BYU team that was not just a quarterback that led them to an 11-2 campaign last year. In many respects, BYU overcame some of the weaknesses of Jake Retzlaff to go 11-2, almost in spite of him at times, versus him being the end-all, be-all, the Tom Brady type player, Peyton Manning type player that lifts the team to that magical. This was a team that was the sum total of its parts. Offense, defense, special teams. They got contributions across the board. And if they can get that same type of belief, internalization of this fuel to fire you and just go out there and do what they did a season ago, I can't say that BYU is going to go 11-2. In fact, I've said that I think BYU going 8-4 is kind of where I've got them pegged right now. But are you going to bet against them if they can do what they did a season ago with that disrespect that they've kind of thrown their way? I think they could, but hey, I'm a radio producer and a podcast host who talks all things BYU every single day. So I got just a little bit of bias on my side. All right. That's going to do it for today's edition of the show. As always, you guys are the best. Thank you for subscribing, rating, and reviewing. Join the Locked On Cougars Insider Group, shouting me out when you see me out in public. I appreciate any and all support you guys lend to this podcast. And as always, once again, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. And we'll catch you guys again tomorrow, right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.